Again, Hannah is incredibly inspirational and articulate in terms of what she's describing and the change in student behavior that her teaching has brought about. And there's quite a number of things that she highlighted. The idea of having students write dual language books or write in their mother tongue, and then we find a way to get that into Dutch or English is something that can be incredibly powerful. And as she noted, I've used the term identity text to talk about that. And the idea behind that term is that we're talking about literacy activities that are connected to students' identities. And so students create something, they create some artifact. It doesn't have to be written text, it could be a music video that students may create, it could be a dramatization of something that they do, it could be drawing, as she highlighted with the student from Thailand. And once what students have created is out there, once it's a product, once it's an artifact, then it holds a mirror up to students in which their identities are reflected back in a positive light. And so they see themselves in what they produce, they see themselves as being capable, they see themselves as creating something that other students, their peers in the classroom, are interested in. Their parents provide positive feedback, the teacher provides positive feedback. So suddenly you've got a process where the student's identity is being affirmed. And so they go from the status of being the Dutch as a second language student or the English as a second language student, where they're in a way captured or trapped in that cocoon of an identity that where people only see that student who's limited in the language of the schooling, and they're defined by what they lack. They go from there into an identity where they're defined by what they've produced, by their background knowledge, by what they know, what their talents, their drawing talents, etc., their ability as bilinguals, multilinguals. And so it's a dramatic change that leads to more confident participation. And Hannah was, I think, very clear in terms of what that means in terms of students' sense of self. But it's more than just the identity issues, because again, she highlighted some of this when what we've observed when students have created dual language books, when they've found a way, or the teachers found a way, when they've worked with another teacher who might speak the child's language, and they've come up with an English version of what they've created. If you'd given students that English version before they had written it, they would not have been able to read it. But after they had written it, they could read it. And so it's a really powerful example of what Courtney Kasdan, an American applied linguist, many years ago, probably about 40 years ago, called performance precedes competence. So actually doing something leads to the competence to do it. And so when students write a story in their first language, and then they work with older students maybe who speak that language, or work with a teacher who might speak the language, or even go to Google Translate and put it in, and we get a kind of a bit of a fractured version in the school language. But then it gives the teacher or other students the gist of what the student's trying to say, so the teacher can set up a little, maybe 2 or 3 student editing group to help the student come up with a really coherent version in the school language of what they're trying to say. And once we've done that, the student has learned a huge amount of the school language that they didn't know before. And as Hannah pointed out, it's directly related to their experience. And it's enabling them to share their experience, share their talents with other students, with their parents, with the teacher. And we can digitize this, we can put it up on the web. Some of the work that Lisa Leone's students produced, been read by thousands of people because they're up in the web. And she mentioned a student called Kanta, who's the student who said, you know, when I came here in grade 4, she was then in grade 7, the teacher didn't know what she was capable of, and the teacher gave her a coloring book and some crayons and told her to get on coloring with it. And she said, I felt so bad about that because I'm capable of doing much more than that. I'm not just a coloring person. And so when we see examples like this, we realize, first of all, that there's a really problematic aspect to what we have been doing and what is normal practice in many countries of just assuming that children's first language has no role within the classroom. And but second, we see the possibilities that are opened up for all children, not just in the Dutch as a second language class or the English as a second language class, but in the mainstream class, for all children to gain a greater sense of how languages work, gain a greater sense of how different orthographies are used in different countries. They can increase their knowledge of geography by looking at the countries where their classmates come from. So the pedagogical opportunities that open up when we start teaching through a multilingual lens, when we see what I'm doing as a teacher through a multilingual lens, rather than just narrowing it down to what students are capable of doing through the target language, which they don't know yet. There's a huge range of pedagogical opportunities and learning opportunities that emerge for all children, including students who are monolingual speakers of the school language.
That's true. Wow, a lot to reflect upon. I was thinking also about the fact it comes back very often in your story that with adopting a multilingual pedagogy, you also connect people together, and you connect even the school to the parents and the parents to the school.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that we've seen in some of the work that colleagues of mine and I've done is that this is a major way of getting parents involved. Certainly the first Canadian example of this was a project called the Dual Language Showcase that a teacher called Patricia Chow, who worked in Thornwood Public School in the Peel Board close to Toronto. She initiated this. She was in grade 1, and it came about as a result of discussions that we were having about how can we get parents more directly involved in the school. This is a school with 80% of the students from non-English speaking backgrounds, and we came across some work that a British researcher, Viv Edwards, had done, where she had used dual language books, commercially produced dual language books in the classroom, or worked with teachers who had used those books, for example, in English and Urdu. Patricia thought, this is a good idea, I'd love to do that. And she tried to find some books that would reflect the languages of the kids that were in her classroom, and there were very few available at that stage in Toronto. This is back around about the year 2000. And so she said, well, we can do it ourselves. And so the Dual Language Showcase went on for many, many years, and students produced over about 130 stories in their home languages and in English. Parents got very much involved in this because a lot of the students were not literate in their home language, so students might write a story initially in English. And this is the mainstream class, but the mainstream class was highly multilingual. Students might write a story initially in English and then work with their parents to translate that story into Arabic or Urdu or whatever language is the home language. And then Patricia put these up on the web. And this was the early days of the web, and they were there for the students to see and to share with their parents. They also printed out copies of these books, and their books became part of the school library. So they were there with all of the mainstream authors that they were reading. Their books were there, and their peers and kids from other classes could take these books out and bring them home to read with their parents. So you have huge impacts from something that at first sight is fairly simple, just allowing kids' languages to come into the classroom.
Yeah, and the idea of a legitimate audience is also very important. So people who can relate to these stories, so the parents, but also being in the library, open to everybody. And
yeah, and again, it opens up the entire school to this, because other classes that may not have been doing this kind of work get inspired, and so they realize that there are books in multiple languages in the school library that children from the school have written, so their children can go and take these books out and read in their home language, bring them home for the parents to read, and so you've got a pedagogical process where the entire school is boosting the legitimacy of students seeing themselves as multilinguals and seeing that as something very positive, as something that is in addition to their identity rather than something that they should be ashamed of. And it's a dramatic difference in identity positioning compared to the traditional practice in many countries where students are punished for speaking their home language.
Generates oppositional identities, yeah. Thank you. I think it's really language friendly.